Let's move into the JFK Marilyn Monroe assassination. What do you know about that?
A lot.
This is the kind of story that makes you question everything you thought you knew about two of the most iconic figures in American history, Marilyn Monroe and John F. Kennedy. It's astonishing that this doesn't make headlines more often, given the scope of the conspiracy, the high-profile players involved, and the web of secrets spun by shadowy government agencies. It's the kind of thing that makes you wonder, what else is out there that we haven't been told? Let's dive into this wild world where Hollywood glamour meets covert CIA operations. It's a place where powerful figures, from presidents to movie stars, collide with the kind of secrets that are so dangerous. Knowing too much could cost you your life. Ready? Let's get into it.
So some years ago, I got from the vault from a national security agency guy an envelope. And it had a big old Xerox of this document that was a wiretap of Marilyn Monroe dated a couple of days before they found her dead. And it was signed by the CIA guy, James Jesus Angleton III. Now, he was a famous fanatical mole hunter and leak stopper at the agency back in the early 60s. Fanatical. They had wiretapped Marilyn Monroe's phone, and she was calling up Bobby Kennedy and a friend of hers named Rothberg in New York, who was an art dealer, saying that she was going to hold a press conference to tell the whole world what Kennedy had told her about, and I'm quoting, the objects from outer space from the 40s found in New Mexico, a clear reference to Roswell and a couple of the other events that happened out there. That was the only one, by the way. There was a 1945 crash of an ET craft that happened right after we detonated the first atomic bomb. That has just gotten a Trinity site that has just gotten documented by a good friend of mine, Paula Harris, who's a researcher. You know, it's a fascinating book. So, and there's material associated with that. But, so Marilyn, because I think the Kennedy brothers had distanced themselves because the affair she was having with Jack Kennedy was a little bit getting too well known, she was angry. And so she was threatening to spill the beans in a public news conference where the whole world would have been there. So before she could do that, Wetworks killed her, made it look like an overdose of drugs. But it wasn't. One of her friends way back in the day was this old, cool guy. He was named Burl Ives. He was an actor and singer back in the day. And he was friends. And he was on my executive committee up until he died. Interesting guy, 33rd degree Mason, all that. But he didn't know anything about the subject. So I go into his house in Anacortes, Washington, and I have this document. I didn't bring the original to it, but the one I have. And it's this transcript, and it flat out, he looks and he goes, now I know why they killed her. I said, of course. And of course, Kennedy was livid that happened because he had affection for her, even though he had to distance for political reasons. But he was working on an executive order at that time that would have dissolved the agency and a lot of these operations that were dealing with this.
The agency is in CIA?
Yeah. So before that could go through the executive review process, he was killed. Now, interestingly, it wasn't just the UFO issue, it was a bunch of issues dealing with this whole constellation of problems. Because remember, he took office right after Eisenhower. Eisenhower's last speech to the world, and you know, he's a 5-star general, right? A 2-term Republican president. It was an Abbie Hoffman. He's the one who coined the term, beware the military-industrial complex. He wasn't anti-military. He was anti-fascist, which is the collusion and control of government interest in the interests of the people by selfish corporate and moneyed people. That's what he was talking about. People have to get clarity on this.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it gets politicized. Now, this is where Eisenhower was coming from. Now, I have a witness, a guy named Stephen Lubkin, who was an attorney, but at the time he was an Army Signals Corps guy who was in the White House with Eisenhower. And he saw Eisenhower doodling pictures of UFOs and stuff. And he talked to him and he says, yeah, he says, I've lost, they're not telling me much anymore about this. I've lost control of these projects. A very interesting read. It's in the disclosure book.
It is, and it's, okay.
Yeah, in that book. And so it's a worrisome situation because I've been able to piece together the presidential level of this back all the way to Roosevelt. By the way, Foo Fighters, yes, it's a rock band, but they named their band, Dave Grohl was in Nirvana, after what a Foo Fighter is, which is what a UFO was called.
Really?
In World War II. So in World War II, we had these weird, almost plasma-like objects zipping around our aircraft. The Nazis thought it was a secret Allied weapon. We thought it was a secret Nazi weapon. So there's this medical doctor, this elderly guy was on my team. He was a hematologist, pathologist in Denver. And his uncle was General Jimmy Doolittle. And so this is how I knew this story. So General Doolittle was sent over there by Roosevelt to look into what the heck are these Foo Fighters. And General Doolittle comes back to the White House and tells Roosevelt, "Sir, those are, quote, interplanetary vehicles," I'm quoting.
Let's start with Marilyn Monroe, Hollywood's golden girl, an American icon, and the embodiment of beauty and fame. But Monroe wasn't just known for her iconic roles and glamorous lifestyle. Behind the scenes, she was involved with some of the most powerful men in the world, including none other than President John F. Kennedy and his brother, Bobby Kennedy. Monroe's death in August 1962 was ruled as a suicide by overdose. But was it really that simple? Once you peel back the layers, it's clear that Monroe's death was anything but ordinary. So here's the wild part. Just days before her death, Monroe was reportedly preparing to hold a press conference that would have sent shockwaves across the globe. And get this, she was going to spill secrets she had learned directly from the Kennedy brothers. Secrets that most people couldn't even dream of. Monroe had somehow gotten caught up in high-stakes political intrigue, and it seems like she knew way too much. Now I know what you're thinking. What could Monroe possibly know that was so dangerous? Well, according to declassified CIA documents, Marilyn was wiretapped. That's right. The CIA had been listening to her phone calls, and during these calls, she talked about objects from outer space that JFK had told her about. It seems that the president himself had confided in Monroe about classified government knowledge of UFOs, including the infamous Roswell incident. And here's the kicker. Monroe was allegedly ready to blow the lid off these secrets in her press conference. This was no idle gossip. According to these same wiretap documents, the CIA had become deeply concerned about what Monroe might reveal. This wasn't just about extraterrestrial life. Monroe had also become privy to sensitive information about the Kennedy administration's dealings with the Soviet Union, Cuba, and covert CIA operations around the world. Basically, Monroe knew way too much about things that the government desperately wanted to keep under wraps. And if you know anything about the Kennedys, you'll know that their relationship with the CIA was rocky, to say the least. After the Bay of Pigs disaster in 1961, JFK was furious with the agency and had even threatened to dismantle parts of it. The CIA, with its own agenda, was not too happy about being exposed to public scrutiny, and Marilyn Monroe was a potential threat to their secrecy. Now here's where it gets even crazier. Monroe's conversations were reportedly being monitored by none other than James Jesus Angleton, the CIA's counterintelligence chief. Angleton was notorious for his obsession with leaks and secrecy, and it's clear that he viewed Monroe as a potential risk. If she went public with what she knew, it wouldn't just be embarrassing for the Kennedys. It could unravel major government operations and potentially spark an international incident. So, what happened next? Monroe never got the chance to hold that press conference. Instead, she was found dead in her home under suspicious circumstances. And while the official cause of death was listed as an overdose, a growing number of people believe that Monroe was silenced before she could reveal what she knew. This is where Project Mockingbird comes into play, and trust me, this is going to blow your mind.
Well, Mockingbird was one project, but it's an ongoing process that started really in full bore in the 50s. And that was to have major media people who were dual agents. They were in the media, but they were also on the payroll of the agency, the CIA or others, who, and I have a document we published from I believe it was 92, where it says, it's a CIA document, we have people in every major news organization, it says it flat out, that are there to control, stop, alter stories at our request. So here's, I mentioned one myth, and that is that we have a free market and a free economy. We don't. It's managed. Because there's no way we have a free market economy when the most important sciences and technologies of the last 100 years have been ruthlessly suppressed. But the other myth that Americans buy into is that we have a free press, and the fourth estate, as it's called, a check and balance against excesses. But the major media, and also now the major tech companies, are actually actively involved in suppressing the story or spinning it. Now, what do I mean? When you see people on CNN or CBS 60 Minutes, the folks that they will allow to talk about it are people that have been cherry-picked by this cabal, the secret government group, to say what they're told to say. It's scripted.
Do you have any examples of this?
Yes, of course. Nick Pope, Lou Elizondo, Chris Mellon, all those guys.
Okay.
And they have been I know for a fact, been told what to say. And so they say, number one, first big lie, these are a threat to the national security, inferring that from outer space there's a threat. It's not true. Civilizations that are hundreds of thousands to millions of years more advanced than we are, if they were a threat, we'd be a charcoal floating through space about 1945 August with the atomic bomb. Number two, they will say that we don't know what these are. Maybe they're from China. Maybe they're, and even senior members of the Senate intelligence community have said that. We don't know. Because some of those guys have gone up there and whispered in their ear all this disinformation and spin. I know who they are. When in reality, we know what they are, where they come from, which ones are man-made and which ones are extraterrestrial. We absolutely have that data. But see, someone like myself saying that, that's going to get cut out of any show. For example, I was on a show, it had 22 million people listening live back some years ago. And I started talking about some of the senior membership of this committee that's running this covert program. And I got to one name. I talked about Admiral Bobby Ray Inman. He's been involved for decades with this. And then he went to the Board of Science Applications International Corporation, SAIC. It's one of the crown jewels of contracting on these exotic propulsion and energy systems. And then, I think it was during the election, the second election for W, I mentioned that one of the most senior people is Dick Cheney. And we went to an unscheduled commercial break. A voice broke in, and the host had no idea. And it said, Dr. Greer, change the direction of this conversation now, or we will dump this show live. I said, with 22 million people listening? He says, yes. Don't talk about this. And the host was so sad. And the host to this day will say, oh, we can talk about anything. It's like when Joe Rogan says, oh, yes, I can talk about free speech. To make his deal with Spotify, the show I did with Joe Rogan, forcibly by the corporate entity, had to be taken out. It is not in the lineup. You have to find it elsewhere. So anyone who thinks that the media doesn't purge whistleblowers of someone of what we're doing is naive. So Mockingbird, there have been a lot of code names for this. But we have an Air Force Intelligence, AFOSI guy that I have on tape. And it's in the unacknowledged documentary. People should look at it. It's for free. You can see it for free on all these sites. He was at Kirkland Air Force Base. And he admitted, and I'm quoting, taking bags of cash to people both in the local and national media, reporters, to secure their cooperation with telling stories or altering or putting a spin on them. So that corruption and rot reaches very firmly into the Fourth Estate and now big tech. And, where it's been proven now through files released that people are shadow banned, algorithms are changed. We had a whistleblower that we put his interview, he was willing to do it posthumously. So I did the interview with him, he died, his wife sent me his death certificate, and then I uploaded it on our YouTube channel, which I have, you can go to it. And his name was Pawlek, Pawelec. And he had been involved in the development of the embeddable radio frequency chips.
Really?
Yeah, and he knew of their use in simulating alien abductions that were being done by the CIA and military. How deep the deception goes. So we put this up. In a few days, it hit 675,000 views. And then overnight, we checked, and the counter is down to 6,700. They went in and chopped off those numbers so it would take it out of the algorithms as a trending video.
I've seen it happen.
Yeah. And so people who think that doesn't happen, I just want to say, I got a bridge to sell you to nowhere, or swampland to sell you, because they're just simply naive. And this is another reason why we have to find creative strategies to do this, because the corporate, if you look at the major media, there's a handful of individuals and corporations that control all of it. And that becomes a problem when there's this collusion between these covert operations and corporate. Now, to give a little history lesson, late 1800s, early 20th century, something developed called fascism. Of course, now anyone that you disagree with, you call them a fascist. Mm-hmm. But the definition of fascism were large financial and corporate interests controlling government policy and what the government would do against the interests of the people. That's what fascism is. Go look it up. Thomas Jefferson warned of it. He actually wrote warned of the unchecked power of the corporations corrupting government. That's where we are, but on a massive scale globally. So that's happened with the media, it's happened with the government programs, and it's happened in other sectors, financial, what have you. So the interests of we, the people, have gotten run over by the interests of a relatively handful of extraordinarily powerful corporate and individuals.
How many people do you think are involved at that level?
There are 200 or 300 people on this committee, and one branch of it is called MAGIC, the Majority Intelligence Committee, MAJI, but committee is MAGIC. Well, I have a document that lists it. So this is in my book, Unacknowledged. That document's in there. It's a secret document that I acquired and published. They can't punish me because I declared the project's illegal. A lot of people say, how have they not pursued you? I said, they can't. Because I had an FBI guy say, I said, let's put the handcuffs on right now and get on the dance floor. Because this is going to go to the, even if it goes in camera, it's going to go to a court, and I will be able to prove. Because what are we going to do? We're going to subpoena the CI director that I briefed. We're going to subpoena the senators I have briefed. We're going to subpoena the head of the Defense Intelligence. All these people will have to tell the truth or lie under oath, that in fact they were left out. And so I said, I don't think you want a court case like that. Now, people say, man, this guy's a son of a bitch. Well, I'm sort of a fighter, and I'm not intimidated. But, so they offer me $2 billion. I go, f off. I'm sorry, my language, but, get lost. Then, they threatened. And in the 90s, we had 3 people on my team killed, and I was almost killed. And then I put security in place. It's invisible. But basically, there are very powerful people who want us to get this done because they know what's at stake. And we've authorized lethal force if anyone that I'm working with is harmed. And that's in place. That's been in place since 1998.
Since 1998?
Yep. And that's why no one I'm working with has had that happen.
Since?
Yep. Since 98, nobody.
Project Mockingbird was a covert CIA operation designed to control and manipulate the media. Yeah, you heard that right. The CIA had journalists and media figures on their payroll, working within major news organizations to shape public opinion and, more importantly, to suppress stories that didn't fit their agenda. Imagine this. You're reading the news thinking you're getting the full story, but in reality, certain details are being buried or twisted to serve the interests of powerful government agencies. That's exactly what happened with Monroe. The media quickly pushed the narrative that she had tragically taken her own life, completely ignoring the glaring inconsistencies surrounding her death. The disappearance of phone records, the delayed response of her housekeeper, the lack of pill residue in her stomach, all of these were swept under the rug. But why would the media go along with this? Project Mockingbird, that's why. The CIA was pulling the strings behind the scenes, making sure the public would never know the full story. Monroe's death was treated as a personal tragedy, not as part of a larger conspiracy. Now let's fast forward to November 1963, a little over a year after Monroe's death. John F. Kennedy is assassinated in Dallas, Texas, and once again, the official story that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone raises more questions than it answers. Just like Monroe's death, JFK's assassination is shrouded in mystery, and many people believe that there's much more to the story than we've been told. Think about it. JFK had made powerful enemies, not just within the CIA, but also within the mafia and foreign governments. The mafia had worked closely with the CIA on covert operations against Cuba, but the Kennedy administration, especially Bobby Kennedy, had begun to crack down hard on organized crime. So it's not hard to imagine that the mafia, along with rogue elements in the CIA, might have wanted JFK out of the way. And just like with Monroe, Project Mockingbird was there to control the narrative. The media quickly accepted and promoted the idea that Oswald acted alone, despite evidence suggesting that there may have been multiple shooters. Anyone who questioned the official story was labeled a conspiracy theorist and dismissed. But when you start connecting the dots between Monroe's death, JFK's assassination, and the CIA's influence over the media, it becomes clear that there's something much bigger going on here. Now let's circle back to the UFO angle, because this is where things get really interesting. JFK was reportedly obsessed with the idea of extraterrestrial life and had even made inquiries into classified UFO programs. Some believe that his interest in UFOs and his desire to disclose information to the public may have played a role in his assassination. After all, if JFK was planning to reveal what he knew about Roswell and other UFO incidents, it would have been a huge threat to the government's secret programs. And remember, Monroe had planned to go public with this information as well. It's not too much of a stretch to think that both Monroe and JFK were silenced to prevent them from exposing the truth about UFOs. The stakes were incredibly high. This wasn't just about politics or scandal. This was about controlling the narrative on a global scale, and anyone who threatened that control became a target. So where does that leave us? Marilyn Monroe's death, JFK's assassination, and the CIA's stranglehold on the media through Project Mockingbird are all connected in ways that are almost too wild to believe. But once you start digging into the facts, it's clear that there's a much bigger story at play here. One that involves secret government programs, the manipulation of public perception, and the elimination of those who knew too much. Think about it. If the government was willing to go to such lengths to cover up what happened to Monroe and JFK, what else are they hiding? What other secrets have been buried? And what truths have been distorted to keep the public in the dark? The world of politics and power is a dangerous one, and the more you learn about it, the more you realize that the official story is often only a fraction of the truth. So the next time you hear a news story that seems too neat, too packaged, remember that there might be something much bigger lurking beneath the surface. There you have it, guys. Hollywood, politics, UFOs, the CIA, and a deadly web of secrets. What do you think? Was Marilyn Monroe silenced before she could expose the truth? Did the CIA have a hand in JFK's assassination? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into these hidden stories.